represents Texas's 35th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Casar was sworn into office in January of 2023 and serves as the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Prior to being elected to Congress, he served on the Austin City Council for 7 years. There, he championed and passed policies including protections for renters from corporate abuse, affordable housing programs, and paid sick leave ordinances in Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio. In his first term in Congress, Representative Casar successfully pushed for the introduction of the first ever federal heat rule, which will protect over 30 million American workers facing extreme heat on the job, which is great. Additionally, he authored legislation to connect the Texas grid to neighboring power grids that would save billions and prevent future mass blackouts. Last year, he introduced the Stop AI Price Gouging and Wage Fixing Act to prohibit the use of surveillance-based price and wage setting. So what we're going to do is he's going to give some remarks. I'm going to ask him a few questions, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. So let me turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, Susan. Thank you to CFA for all that you do. I'm so glad to be with you this morning. I'll start things off with the bad news. Well, of course, if there's any New Yorkers in the room, the bad news is the Spurs are gonna do things the Knicks. I know, I usually don't try to start my speeches by getting booed, but I know when I do that, there's usually more New Yorkers in Texas. But the other bad news that obviously we're all here working on is that Americans are getting screwed. We're under attack from what Teddy Roosevelt called the unholy alliance between corrupt government and greedy corporations. Working people in this country are just getting robbed by corporations who squeeze every last dollar from them, whether it's on the job site or at the grocery store or at the gas pump. And they're getting help from fraud politicians who change the rules to make it easier for those corporations to get away with it. And I want to just start off by giving you a few examples, and we should start with surveillance pricing. I'm deeply concerned that AI right now is on the path to making just a few people richer while everybody else gets screwed. One especially egregious example is surveillance pricing. So this is when companies hoover up your personal data all across the internet, feed it through AI, and use that data to figure out exactly how much they can jack up your prices, just how much more that they can charge you, whether it is at the grocery store or when you're buying something on the internet. And many Americans already feel this and know about this when they go and try to buy an airline ticket. So think about an airline knowing that you Google the words funeral arrangements or someone's obituary, and then jacking up your individual prices, knowing that you have to make that flight in a couple of days. Just recently, Instacart got caught using surveillance pricing, and airlines are bragging on their earnings calls about how much more they're using AI to set prices. So whether you know it or not, you're probably already being ripped off by surveillance pricing. And I believe that now is the time to stop this before it starts spreading all over the economy. That's why I filed the first federal bill to ban surveillance pricing, and I'm working also working very closely with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib on this issue to make sure that we stop this practice wherever it is found, whether you're buying an airline ticket, whether you are at the grocery store, or actually whether or not it is surveillance pricing to jack up your prices or to suppress your wages. You can also imagine in the gig economy, ride-sharing apps or others, knowing whether a worker recently visited a pawn shop and hit hard times, and then offering that worker a lower wage, knowing that they're desperate to get that trip or desperate to get that job. And so we already make it illegal to ban price gouging when a disaster strikes an entire community. And now we should do the same to stop companies from knowing when a disaster has struck your personal life in order to rip you off because of a personal emergency. So this is just a scummy practice. And we know that voters across the political spectrum, all across the country, oppose the scummy practice of surveillance pricing. It's just members of Congress that haven't caught up to our voters yet. And so this is a real issue where if you guys go and work, members of Congress, this is something that I think can unite us and probably just divides, can unite, I hope, my party, but divide the lobbyists. And I think that we should be looking every single day for bills that benefit consumers and voters and workers, and that the only people left hanging out to dry are the special interests. Here's another example. Here's another example of a really growing problem in the economy and a really growing, speaking of lobbies, I mean, like just a huge growing lobby, which to me is really dangerous because this is again an area where I think the voters want consumer protection, but we know that the industry is rapidly growing. Donald Trump's family is deeply embedded in the industry, and they're going to do everything they can to block any form of protections as long as they can, even if there's actually not voter support for what they're doing. And that is what we're seeing right now in prediction markets. It's a new way we're seeing corporations screwing over consumers and everyday people. Unregulated prediction markets that are starting to just grow throughout our economy. I mean, you can't watch the Super Bowl without seeing like 5 ads for these things now. And what many people don't know is that 70% of the profits from these so-called prediction markets go to just 0.04% of the bettors. 70% of the profits, 0.04% of bettors. Why is that? That is because there is rampant insider trading in these unregulated prediction markets. They're built for rampant insider trading. On the day before the Iran war, 150 accounts placed highly unusual bets on Polymarket, saying that the war was going to start the next day. Over 100 of these accounts made $10,000 betting on the war. 16 made $100,000. One person made about $500,000. And it's not just the war. From the Super Bowl to the Oscars, people placed huge bets on stuff that a small number of people know about in advance. In some cases, they're placing bets on events that already happened. So you may have seen Chris Hayes talk about how there were bets placed on what he was supposedly going to say on the Colbert Show. But he had already been on the Colbert Show. There's already a live audience that watched the show. There's an entire crew that put the show together. But people were betting on this as if this is something happening in the future, when in fact, some people knew already exactly what happened. So, if the Trump administration isn't going to clean up because his kids are too busy cashing in, then it's time for us to take action. And that's why Chris Murphy in the Senate and I have introduced the Bets Off Act to ban betting markets on war and peace, on government action, and on events controlled entirely by one person. Look, if people want to sign up for a poker game, that is entirely up to them. But no one should be allowed to run a casino where the house knows exactly what cards are in everyone's hands. And that's what's going on right now. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, the lobbyists for that kind of unregulated casino are just growing and growing in influence here in Washington, D.C. And so we need folks like you all out there making sure that consumers' voices are heard. Surveillance pricing and prediction markets are just two deeply troubling examples of how things are getting worse for American consumers. I could go on and on, don't get me started on what utility companies, for-profit utility companies are doing with their monopolies. It's just the tip of the iceberg, but I think it really shows how narrow special interests with gobs of campaign cash and lobby cash are screwing over everyday consumers every day here in Washington, D.C. We know the price of everything is going up, from housing, gas, utilities, healthcare, childcare. It's all way too high. And that's why the Progressive Caucus, which I chair, has put out a new affordability agenda to take on big corporations and bring down the prices of these essentials. And we're talking about a concrete list of things. This is, I know maybe a radical idea, a concrete list of 10 bills that we would campaign on, talk to voters about, get them excited about, have them vote for their choice of representative based on what they're going to vote for. And then if we retake the House, here's the crazy part. We actually bring those bills to the floor. So that Americans know what the people they elected actually stand for. And so let me give you a few examples. We want to bring down the price of gas by taxing the insane profits of oil companies that are jacking up prices off of this war and giving that money back to consumers. We want to bring down the price of those utilities by cracking down on for-profit utility monopolies that charge consumers for things like monthly massage memberships and private jets and spa memberships. They go to our state PUCs and say they have to raise rates. And they're putting their political contributions and lobby costs into those required rate increases. We bring down the price of groceries by cracking down on grocery stores that use anti-competitive practices. We bring down the price of prescription drugs by saying if Big Pharma doesn't want to provide an adequate supply of generics at a fair price, the government will do it for them. I started today with a lot of bad news, but there's actually really good news. If we stand together in this moment where consumers and workers are so pissed off and are looking for leadership, we have a chance to make enormous change. When working people come together, we beat impossible odds. We are seeing inequality and government corruption like we haven't seen since the Gilded Age. But in the 1920s and in the 1930s, when the robber barons controlled our country at every level, threw us into the Great Depression, working people stood together, elected FDR, took back our country from the ultra-rich, created the New Deal, built the middle class alongside the union movement here at home, defeated fascism around the world, and I believe that this is our moment to have another FDR moment as a country. It's up to us to break that unholy alliance between corrupt government and corrupt big corporations, get big money out of politics, start out by banning things like corrupt prediction markets, surveillance pricing, utility companies charging us like crazy, bring down the cost of the basics, and restore the trust in our system and a more functional system of working people that they can actually represent people that represent them and not just the lobby here in Washington, D.C. Thank y'all very much.